Hey everybody, this is my second pass at this video. I made one and uploaded it, and a couple of people in the comment section very quickly alerted me that I'd made some errors in the video, and I thanked them for that, so I decided to just delete the whole thing and make it again from what I made a mistake on. Sometimes in certain albums I have to go back and brush up, and you have these albums so many times in stereo or mono when you get them mixed up, certain details, and I really should do a refresher course for some of them. The album we're talking about is this, Something New, The Beatles, U.S. Capitol album. Before I go into detail, I promised I would give a shout out to a new member of the vinyl community. He spells his name as Beatlemanic 1799. There's no A in it. I don't know if it was meant to be Manic or Maniac without the A, but it's Beatlemanic 1799 if you want to check out his channel. He's doing Beatle videos for those that are into the Beatles. So, welcome to the VC. Alright, getting back to the album. This is an interesting album. I've always enjoyed it. It was released in both stereo and mono. The copy here that I prefer, and the one I'm showing, is mono for a couple of reasons. Here's the back cover. Just a little bit of trivia for any people who are interested in such things. I went to the Fest for Beatles fans last February, and I was in a trivia contest, and one of the questions that was asked was, what song are the Beatles performing on the cover of this album from the Ed Sullivan Show? A lot of people took guesses, they guessed every song, and nobody really got it right until the person who asked the question said, the answer is, I Saw Her Standing There. And I think he arrived at that because of first of all, the set from when they were singing that song, and also I think he said something like, "This is the only time where Paul is up at the microphone and John and George aren't singing at the same time," or the way the setup is. So he was able to surmise that that was the answer. It's a little interesting bit of trivia there. Okay, now in 1964, when the Beatles were hitting it big, Capitol Records were the ones who released their albums for the most part. Now, there was an exception. The album before this in the U.S. was the United Artists version of A Hard Day's Night, because United Artists had the rights to the soundtrack, and they also wound up making the picture. So they put the soundtrack album out, but Capitol didn't have an album with the songs from A Hard Day's Night. So this album has the second side of it, songs that are from the movie, and the first side is all new, okay, you might say. And I'll tell you what I like about this album. Now, first we start off side one with I'll Cry Instead. Now, I talked about that song in the last video for the Hard Day's Night album, United Artists. But what I like about the song briefly is that it's one of the earliest examples, I think, of John really like talking about his personal feelings and having a chip on his shoulder and being kind of cynical and irritable and wanting to break all the girls' hearts and things like that. It's never been one of my top tier favorite Beatles songs, but I do enjoy it. There's no Beatles song really that I don't enjoy for one reason or another, but there's some that I'm bigger on than others. It's a good way to start the album. It's got a really good opening guitar. Now, a mistake that I made the last time I made this video, I didn't realize, I'll Cry Instead, we all know there's a long version with an extra verse and a short version. The short version is the version that most people are familiar with, and I really don't know how that was possible. But for the most part, in the UK on Parlophone records, the version that we all are used to, that's missing a verse. John sings the original line from the opening of the song twice, sings it 2 times. It's not a re-edit of the first verse, it's a whole new singing, whole new performance of the first verse. And that only appears on the United Artists soundtrack album that was released for the film, and also on the US 45, and here on the mono version, which is what my mistake was. I was under the memory that the short version appeared on Something New, but I think that's only the stereo version now that people have pointed out to me. And this version of the mono edition does have the longer version that's desirable. So it just goes to show you, with a little help from my friends, I can get some of these details right. And that only makes me like the mono version even more. I mean, to me, I'll Cry Instead has to have the longer version. It's not a long song to begin with, but I think it really benefits from John singing the opening line 2 times, driving it home the second time. Okay, the second song on side one is Things We Said Today. Beautiful Paul ballad, really nice song. Anytime at All is the third track on here. And it's a good rocker from John. He really sings it with conviction. And of course, you got Paul doing the answer backs, you know, with John saying anytime at all the first time, Paul repeating it second time. Really good. Fourth track to me is underrated. It's When I Get Home. And the reason I say that that's underrated is because, well, from my experiences, anytime I'm like on a message board or some kind of Beatle gathering and we talk about what are the least favorite Beatles songs, When I Get Home always gets nominated in there. And I never really could understand it. I think it's really pretty intense. And again, a great vocal from John Lennon. I really like it. Some people don't like the lines in there about the cows coming home, which I could live with that. But what I really want to point out, something special about this album, and I can't swear to this because we all make mistakes, you know, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the version of When I Get Home that's on this mono version only of Something New in the States is the only place I've ever seen where you can get this particular version. There's a line that John sings when he says, "Till I walk out that door." And we all know the way that sounds if you're familiar with the song and have it committed to memory. But on this particular version, he kind of stretches it a little bit. He sings, "Till I walk out that door," only on the mono version on Something New. To the best of my knowledge, I've never really heard that anywhere else. Now, there's a German version of this Something New album, and there's many imports other than the UK and US. So maybe they use the same tape or master for some other version, but that's one of the benefits to having the mono version of Something New here. It's got that on it too, so I really prefer that version. Then we get to Slow Down. Now here's the other side of the coin, where the mono version of Slow Down here, for me personally, is not as preferable as the stereo version. You know, a lot of these early Beatles songs are interesting because they have different sounds to them. You know, you would think that after all these years, we know all the Beatles songs, and what else is there that we could possibly say about them, right? Well, there's always more stuff to discover, and there's little nuances that are different on the mono or stereo of songs, and that's even the case in the early days. And I don't know, I just feel like on this mono version, Slow Down is missing a little something here. I kind of like it with a few little extra flourishes of instruments and things that I hear. Just little things I pick up. The last song on side one is Matchbox. You know, it's a Carl Perkins song, and I should mention that Slow Down was a cover version of a Larry Williams song. Great vocal by John, you know, which he would later do on Dizzy Miss Lizzy, which he previously had done on Money. He just has a real good rockin' voice for songs like Slow Down. Matchbox is sung by Ringo, and I love the way Ringo sings that song. And, you know, recently on his last couple of tours, if you go to see Ringo, he's been opening up with Matchbox as his opening number when he comes on stage. And there's a great version of Ringo doing Matchbox on a Carl Perkins Showtime special. Carl Perkins and Friends. George Harrison also joined that performance. And Ringo's on the drums singing a terrific version of Matchbox. So I recommend seeing that if you can find it. Look on YouTube or somewhere if you can't get it. Matchbox is another song that I kind of prefer the stereo version of. It's funny, you know. They sound different, mono and stereo. And a lot of times, you know, Ringo's voice sounds, it's double-tracked or echoed, or it sounds like he's repeating his own singing a little bit there. And I kind of like the stereo version better. It was a great way to close out side one, though. And overall, this is really a good, perfect album side to me. And that's what's really new. I should also throw in that one of the things that I like about the U.S. albums, by Capitol, a lot of, you know, diehards and perfectionists, of which I'm one, and years ago I wouldn't have it any other way, is, you know, people don't like that this is not what the Beatles intended. This is not the album the Beatles wanted to make originally, you know. But doesn't mean they're not good albums on their own. And I think sometimes the Beatles would have benefited from some of the ideas here. For example, the first four songs here, I'll Cry Instead, Things We Said Today, Anytime at All, and When I Get Home, they're all on the UK version by Parlophone, you know, that we all know, of A Hard Day's Night. But the two songs at the end, Slow Down and Matchbox from side one, are only available in England, well at the time anyway, only available as an EP, 45. And it's strange because back in the day, I believe that the feeling was that most people bought singles or EPs as compared to the albums. But these days, zoom ahead, I kind of think it's nicer not to have to go fishing around for various 45s and EPs and just have them all concise on an album. I like having Slow Down and Matchbox on here. You know, they were originally part of the Long Tall Sally EP in England. That's side one. Flip the record over to side two, and we start out with a song that you never would have thought was really a great idea for an opener, but it comes crashing in on here. Tell Me Why. Tell Me Why is another Beatles song that I feel is underrated. I love that song. And to open up side two with it, especially again on this version, on something new, in the stereo in particular, it really crashes in and it sounds a lot more lively for some reason than the more laid back one that we're used to off the past US Hard Day's Night album, and also generally that we hear of that song elsewhere in the UK. I just, something about the quality of some of these tracks on something new I really like. Love that song. The next track, And I Love Her. Now, I didn't really realize this. Thanks a lot for pointing this out to me. And I never know your name. Is it JL Draw? I don't know. I don't know what your name is. In the comments section, I don't know what your real name is. He reminded me that And I Love Her on this album is supposedly the only place where Paul's vocal is single-tracked and not double-tracked. You know, some nuances I miss. That's the risk you take when you try these reviews. You might miss something. But, you know, that's interesting. And, of course, he also pointed out something which I knew but didn't mention last time, that there is a longer version of And I Love Her where the end is repeated on the German version of this Something New album. And I think they also put that on the American album, The Rarities, in 1980. All right. Third song is I'm Happy Just to Dance With You. George Harrison vocal, written for him by, you know, Lennon and McCartney. And there's not much I could say about it. I enjoyed the song. I like it. I like George's vocal on it. Then we go to the next song, If I Fell, also from A Hard Day's Night. And, you know, it's a great song written primarily by John. And so there you have of side two. There were only 5 songs on side two. And the first 4 are from the Hard Day's Night film. So a lot of fans, I think, feel like, well, this album, side 2, is kind of a waste because it's just songs we've heard already from A Hard Day's Night. It's side 1 that really is the main show here, our main attraction. With one exception on side 2, the last song on the album. And that's the German version of I Want to Hold Your Hand. You know, the Beatles performed two of their big hits in German language. One of them was She Loves You, and that was called Sie liebt dich in German. And for some reason, that wasn't on any album until, in the US anyway, and the Rarities album, until around 1980-ish, when the Rarities album came out in the US, here in the States. Now, the song here, I Want to Hold Your Hand, the version is called, and I'm going to try to pronounce this yet again, Komm, gib mir deine Hand. Okay, I'm not really good at singing it, and or saying it. It's really a bonus to have that, you know, especially at the time. I remember even as a little kid thinking, wow, that's really weird. The Beatles singing in German. And that's a special appeal of this album at the time, especially because even in England, in the mother England where the Beatles came from, you really couldn't really get that easily. And they didn't put that out in England until later on their Rarities album. Well, I think it was the late 1970s or maybe 1980. I get that date mixed up with that too. So that's really an appeal. So side 2 really benefits by that extra special German song. It's a lot of fun to listen to the Beatles singing in German. And I don't know why Sie liebt dich never made it to any of these albums or anything until much, much later, you know. Also interesting is that other songs on side 2 here from A Hard Day's Night were not included. You had the title track, A Hard Day's Night, and the big hit, Can't Buy Me Love. Can't Buy Me Love wasn't issued on an album in the United States until the 1970 Hey Jude compilation, which is really crazy in a lot of ways. So, apparently, again, I learned from again, do I have your name right? JL Draw. He informed me that, which I didn't really know. I thought that originally Capitol didn't have the rights to the song A Hard Day's Night and the song Can't Buy Me Love for an album. And turns out, no, they had the right to put it on an album. Those songs, it's just that apparently they didn't have a right to call the album A Hard Day's Night. You know, they could use the song, but it's interesting that they didn't use them. You know, they should have used them, or at least, I mean, at least Can't Buy Me Love. I don't know. Anyway, I think I've covered everything. I really enjoy this album. And I say, you know, in the early days of me collecting Beatles stuff, when I was just like 16 years old and 17 years old, back in the 70s, I really stayed away from these Capitol albums. You know, the Japanese album imports are so much better sound quality, and I tried to get all the original UK releases as they were intended. But in recent years, I have both a nostalgia preference for now for these. I'm picking them up again. I like them, listening to these again. It's what I grew up with. It's the way I first heard the tracks. And they're good albums, most of them. Most of them are good albums, with the exception of Revolver, which omits a couple of Lennon tracks, but and we won't get into that. But for the most part, these things are really underrated, these albums by Capitol. So, happy anniversary. Thanks for watching.